Emily, you need to
Emily, you need to
mute yourself.
mute yourself.
Okay.
Thanks. So good morning, Emily. Yes, good morning. Emily's San Francisco based. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself in a bit. Lovely to have you here. It's always a sunshine moment when speaking to you, even though it's always towards the evening where in my time zone, let's put it that way. Good to have you. And Rebecca, welcome back. Some of us, I think some people stayed here. We're so excited about the previous sessions on communities that they just stayed in their chairs, and maybe we can pick up any questions that have come up in the meantime.
Or you've worn them out during a long day, so they are too tired to move.
No. That with everyone but the two of you, it might have been the case, but I don't see that on your session, Rebecca. Yeah. So yeah, good to have you. Cloudy good evening from Berlin, and yeah, human behavioral drivers and why engagement matters. I think that's a topic we heard a couple of times already earlier today, right? The human-machine interaction, AI, and whatnot, right? And I heard some birds whisper about your session before, so I think it actually builds a beautiful bridge between the two worlds, right? And yeah, I don't want to spend more time talking myself. Just for the crowd here, it's empty, I know. For the crowd here, Emily and Rebecca are aiming for an interactive session, so we should have plenty of thoughts and questions and crispy questions, maybe. They are up to address them. I'm pretty sure about that. And yeah, would hand over to the two of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. I'll be guiding the slides, but we're going to kind of hop back and forth, so hopefully not too annoying, but very excited for this session together. I'll pass it to Rebecca to get us started.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, some of you, let's see. Oh, there we go. Some of you have been in the session already, so you know me. I am the Principal Knowledge Management and Adoption and Change Expert at Sullivan Gulf. Sullivan Mia, I should say, actually. I forgot to update that last night. Sorry about that. And yeah, we're just going to dive a little bit deeper in with my very smart and dear friend, Emily, in terms of some of the things we talked about in the previous session, but really drill into what are the human behaviors and drivers that make communities tick and why are they so valuable to us as humans.
Amazing. And we'll do some just quick intros so you can better understand why we're both so passionate about this. We're going to dive into some of the research and kind of take you on a little bit of a psychological side of things of what are some of the behavioral drivers behind this, and also what are some of the applications that hopefully could be practical applications for you and your companies. We're going to have some time to talk, and I know some are online, some are in person, so we'll probably just do more as a group discussion, some of the questions that we thought might be helpful to hear best practices from you all and your organizations. And then we'll close out with some Q&A if there are any questions that come up, and takeaways from the discussion together, if that sounds good. So maybe just to share quickly in my background, I initially was never a technology person. I thought I was always more interested in humans and human behavior. I ended up studying social psychology and anthropology when I was an undergrad at Harvard, and did a lot of research looking at collaboration and how do you get cultures to collaborate more effectively and get people to work together more effectively. From there, ended up going and working as a researcher at Disney Imagineering, where I was doing research in the theme parks, looking at how do we apply psychology to different park experiences, which started to become more and more technical. Like, I don't know if anyone's been to any of the Disney parks, but we did a lot of work on like magic bands and ways to pay for things and make it feel like more of a personalized experience, and waiting lines, and ways to detour people in the park to make it less crowded, et cetera. So it was a lot of behavior with like behavioral psychology with technology and computer science. So then went and got my PhD in computer science and psychology at a program at Northwestern. Went to Meta as a researcher for a little while, looking at how do you impact behavior change with customers online, and also got passionate about getting women learn how to code and get more women into tech companies. And that was pulled into a company called Education First, which is some may be familiar. It's actually based out of Switzerland, a large educational travel company where I was doing technology for travel experiences. And then when COVID hit, a lot of my PhD research became very relevant. So I was doing a lot of research looking at how you can use technology to share knowledge and help teams collaborate and learn from each other more effectively. And so that was really the rooting of Parrot, which now we've been building out for about almost 4 years. So you'll hear little bits and pieces about Parrot. This is not a business pitch. We're more just trying to share the psychology with you, but I'll share some of the learnings from our company as well. But that's a little bit of our team in the bottom right corner, but we're really focused on how do we harness the best of human psychology to impact the way that we build technology to share knowledge and learnings and capture tacit knowledge in companies more effectively. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to my dear Rebecca.
I just want for the record to say that Education First is Swedish, not from Switzerland.
You are right. Our headquarters is in Switzerland, but the founders are Swedish. You are right.
And actually the next door neighbor of a friend of mine. So there you go. But you did live in Switzerland for a while. I know that. So it's easy. So some of you who were in the session just before this one know that I am super passionate about communities of practice because it's what really accelerated my career. And it's how I got into knowledge management. So, this is just part of my journey. These are the most formative years of my career since I joined Microsoft now. Almost 19 years ago, actually. I joined in February 2007. And I very quickly got into knowledge management without knowing that I was doing knowledge management, without even knowing that there was something called knowledge management. When I was asked to head up my first community of practice, I thought this was a Microsoft thing. I had no clue that this was something that had been around for now 30 years and a foundational part of what we call knowledge management. So I continued on this journey. I moved to Seattle thanks to the network that I built through my work as a community lead, pioneering the first non-technical community in Microsoft services. And then I did another job for a couple of years at corporate, but I kept bugging the guy who was heading up the team who led the communities and the entire knowledge management strategy and programs. Like once every 2 months, I would knock on his door and say, do you have a job for me yet? Because I really wanted to work full time with communities. And then as I moved into that team, I also had to take on a lot of stuff around IP reuse, IP harvesting, like maturing and evolving of IP. And the content management side of KM was a very bitter pill that I had to swallow to get to work with communities as well. But it kind of grew on me to the point that I joined the M365 product engineering team, working on the release of the very first commercial AI products in M365. Now I like to refer to them as the embryo of Copilot, or, if I'm being generous, I'll call it the prototype or the beta version of Copilot. A lot of the technology in Copilot was originally built around these products, SharePoint Syntex and Viva Topics, but Copilot's vastly outrun it, and a lot of that has been retired as commercial products. And now today, since May this year, I am the knowledge management and change principal expert on knowledge management and change in an organization called Sulava MIA, or Sulava Gulf LLC. So it's nice to be here, and thanks to those who are putting up with me for 2 hours nonstop. Yeah. So how can we design workplaces that make knowledge sharing a natural human behavior and not a chore? Well, that's one of my favorite topics to talk about when I talk about communities. We made several attempts to create communities artificially, as I call it. Some senior vice president or corporate vice president would come knocking on our door and would say, we hear this communities thing is really popular and a lot of good stuff is coming out of it. So we think we can solve some problems in our part of the organization, our division, or or our business area. If we create a community and we put all the salespeople in that community, and they're going to be super happy and super productive and solve a lot of problems too. It failed every time. And after a few failed attempts, we started saying no. Because when we make something a chore, it doesn't really inspire us anymore. And being inspired and being motivated, being triggered by giving for the sake of giving, your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, not necessarily expecting anything immediately in return, kind of is what I see is what the magic sauce that really makes successful communities successful. You can move. Another aspect, and I think part of the reason why we're seeing a lot more investment from Microsoft side and from other companies into communities and community platforms, where the stereotype or the misconception that this was a time thief and a distraction is starting to, we're not hearing that as much anymore. And I think, you know, if you have to pick one thing that was positive that came out of the pandemic, I think it was that it's now a lot more acceptable to talk about employee engagement, employees' well-being. Are they motivated? Do they feel a part of something bigger? And especially that this became very apparent when people started moving back to the office, because everyone did not want to go back, and everyone chose to not go back for 40 hours a week and spend all of their work days in the office. So now we have this thing called hybrid work. And a lot of people thought it was a massive task and a really difficult shift when we went from everyone working in the office to everyone working remote. But that was a walk in the park compared to what companies have gone through now that they've embraced and acknowledged and accepted the fact that people want more flexibility, because it's hard to create a sense of belonging and a sense of community. It's hard when everyone is in different locations sitting at home, only connecting through screens, but it's even harder when you have some people in the room and some people remote. So communities really is a very powerful way of making sure that people feel connected. And that is some of the human drivers, right? We feel the need to be a part of something bigger. And when we feel isolated, we quickly lose motivation because we don't feel like a sense of belonging. We don't feel like we know where we're headed, where our job, our role is going, where the company is going. And that is one of the biggest drivers and causes of unhealth, mental unhealth, where people start eventually feeling so lonely and so isolated that it's starting to affect their mental health. Now, most of you being based in Germany, and you know it's the same in the Nordics, the cost of employees going on an extended sick leave are quite high for a company. We also don't want to have a negative attrition. So we want to avoid people feeling isolated in their workplace. Having that community where you can share and learn and interact with people who are passionate about the same thing can do wonders to avoid that or minimize the risk of that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we're going to move into some of the now ways that we can combat this. And I think we're going to have kind of a combination of some of the research that we've been looking at and doing over the years. I think one of the things just to say to start, which you know we're all familiar with, is just the power of where socio-technical systems can come in and help support people within communities. So I will say there are a lot of good and bad within these types of communities, and a lot of the research that we've done is like, where does this make you feel more connected to communities, and where does it actually make you feel more disconnected? I know I was talking to a company yesterday who was saying, everything's being lost in our Slack channels and it's so noisy and I'm inundated with noise. And then other companies, that's a core heartbeat to how they do feel connected and learn from each other and share that knowledge. We've looked a lot at in the research at different kinds of ways of sharing what you're working on, sharing what you're doing, and getting that validation and feeling that you're not alone, and also through learning from others within these communities. So, while we know that technology can certainly help, and we're going to talk through some of the ways that we've seen it do so and also really help to kind of better capture knowledge and share knowledge, we know that knowledge sharing is still fundamentally a very human problem. One, we know a lot of knowledge is tacit and is not explicit. It's not well documented, or maybe there's multiple versions that all say different things. But the most of the really critical knowledge is living in people, for better or for worse, and not systems. We also know that a lot of times knowledge is they're these silent experts, often subject matter experts, but sometimes not even, who really are holding a lot of that knowledge. They're sharing it with the people that they know, but it's hard for them to actually have the people find them who need that information more effectively. We know that there's a lot of different psychological factors on whether people hold that knowledge or share it. And often, a lot of our value in companies is our knowledge. And so a lot of times people don't want to document or don't want to share that because that is a lot of, our value and power. And then as Rebecca shared, a lot of this has been really altered with a shift to more hybrid work, and, a lot of it still being really dependent on who you know, who you sit near, who you happen to come into contact with as well. So, these are just laying out some of the challenges within the system. There's some interesting principles of when people share and why they share, and we're going to have a question a little bit of, with curiosity of within your organizations, when have you felt people share and why do you think that they share? I think some of the research behind this is really rooted in, one, people share when they feel the sense of social identity and a sense of group belonging. So they share when they feel that they're part of something bigger. They feel that, it's okay for them to share because even if it may be wrong, it's still helpful for people to learn and kind of push back and share that knowledge, that it's actually helpful to share what you think and then to get to have discussion around that. So that sense of an identity and group belonging is really powerful factor in why people share and when they feel comfortable enough sharing. And a lot of that is also rooted in psychological safety and feeling that they're safe within their organization. So there's some really powerful things you can do to build that, which we can talk more about. Secondly, there's a strong sense of reciprocity, people feel more likely to share. So there's a sense of, if I give knowledge, I will get knowledge in return. A lot of times if someone's just giving, but they're never receiving any knowledge or even validation for giving, that really diminishes their motivation to do so. So this feeling of reciprocity and thinking about how do you build, I don't know if anyone's read Adam Grant's Give and Take, but this sense within organizations of when I give, I also am able to receive, and there's that reciprocity happening within teams. So there are a lot of ways that can be built, and even having, kind of times and moments for knowledge fika, which I know we have Rebecca and Don on the line, but really creating these moments where you have intentional moments of reciprocal sharing and the feeling of I'm going to both give and get support and information. And I think in line with that too is feeling respected and feeling a sense of appreciation when you give. I know we talked to a lot of folks who said, we spent months updating SharePoint and no one even noticed, or I never even saw, any benefits of that. Now we have to update it again. And so I think some of those elements of, how do we make sure that we're honoring when people are sharing and also making it worth their time as well. And then lastly, there's a deep cognitive effort in trying to document things without proper scaffolding or without rituals in place. I know we just did a workshop last week, Prepare Up, that was on personal knowledge management, PKM, but really thinking about what are some internal practices that you can build within the organization so that it's just part of these rituals. So it's not like at the end of a project or at the end of the role, you're trying to remember everything and add everything, but are there little ways to kind of build this in so it's lower cognitive load on employees and not such a big undertaking to try and remember everything when it's sometimes too late to remember. And then I think, there are some big psychological barriers for when people don't share and where they hold knowledge. And again, would be curious to hear from you all kind of where you felt this. I know I mean, one of this, as I mentioned a little bit briefly earlier, a lot of this sense is, you want to protect your value. We've talked with a lot of companies where people have been there for over 20 years, and so much of their critical value in the company is that they've been there for 20 years. So how do you both honor that and still encourage them to document and share their learnings, and give them credit for that and honor that who it came from, but really had a lot of this is around protecting value, we find, and also the research supports. There's also kind of this element of a fear of looking wrong. Like, I don't want to put out an answer within Teams if maybe it's wrong. I don't want to document this here if it's going to keep changing. And then my name is tied to that. So I think that's one of the barriers that we often find. There's just kind of this busyness, time scarcity feeling. So, if you don't, I mean, there's never time. We're always also busy. And I know we all feel that. And so, what are ways to kind of make it feel less burdensome and time consuming? And I think that this last one has been pretty critical. We found, like, what is the point in me documenting this? Like, what is the actual value in me sharing this? Will people even read it if I do this? And so I think that's also where community can come in and be so powerful in saying, this does matter, and this is why this is now helping this employee by you sharing this, or this team having understanding into what your team is doing is actually going to help us move faster or reduce duplicative work. So those are some of the reasons why we see people don't share. So a few kind of human behavioral drivers that could help to increase knowledge sharing, and also, that can be really embedded within communities. I think for one, we see, the value of peer recognition and gamification. I'll say one note, obviously it does not work for every employee. Like some people are very turned off by gamification and peer recognition. Hold on 1 second. Okay, still waking up here in California. Secondly, we see, within peer recognition, a lot of this can really tie into then for folks who are rewarded and incentivized by status, by identity, by seeing that they're, being recognized and valued for their contributions. So again, understanding your teams and what different folks are driven by, but that is one tactic that you can utilize. Secondly, we see the power of storytelling and of people really sharing examples of, this person worked on this and this, they shared that knowledge and this is how it helped other people. Or, if I'm sharing my knowledge out, I'm able to also have and build this emotional connection for my employees. Okay, goodness, I'm gonna have water. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, Rebecca, I may have to pass it over to you if my voice continues. But thirdly, I think we see this power of regular rituals and check-ins and retros and just different ways of implementing within your process, ways of making this knowledge sharing much easier and more bite-sized. So we see that, the power of habits and structures, like, again, often people don't want to do this, but when it's very bite-sized and small and manageable, it makes it much easier. So one of the things we often work on with companies is, what are little ways that every Friday we just share our learnings, or we share one quick thing that happened that might be helpful for another team, or we share, something based on what we know people need that might be helpful for them. So just finding ways to embed these kind of short, small rituals into our weeks so it's not so burdensome and large. Fourthly, we see the power in mentorship and shadowing. So we see that, actually really being able to learn from other people and watch them and understand them, which is one of the things that remote work has made often more difficult. But that can really help to build the sense of trust and belonging and learning from other people in a more human way, but also in a way that actually helps us learn how to really kind of, what are the different practices that are hard to document, but are actually very behavioral, that we should be learning from and building from. We also know that there are a lot of very lightweight capture tools that are ways to, and I'm sure some of you are using meeting note takers and, different tools for maybe AI search tools that are going in and capturing what's there and what they can find. But there are ways to kind of make, lightweight and also make it something that is just reduces the burden on people to implement. So that's something that we can talk more about. And then lastly, really thinking about what are internal communities and communities of practice that really help to bridge this sense of social identity that help to increase reciprocity and feelings of give and get within your community, but also help to build the sense of trust and psychological safety within the organization. So we'll talk more about kind of applications within companies, but I wanted to pause for Rebecca. Is there any of those that you want to add to that I missed?
No, I think you've covered them, but maybe this is a good time to see if we have any questions. All right, then I'm going to ask you a question. Do you recognize yourselves in those? What we've talked about so far?
Should we
Do you
raise of
recognize
hands
these
so?
from your, yeah, why not?
We're being spontaneous here. It's a barcamp, right? So I'll give you a 55%,
Okay,
roughly.
good.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to drill into this a little bit deeper and in more
You have a question,
conversation
Rebecca?
shortly. Yeah.
Got a question. Could you recommend some lightweight capture tools? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I'm in a public entity and we have 22,000 employees and lots of them are leaving now. So what do we do with knowledge transfer and what would be lightweight capture tools?
Yes, we know many of them. I mean, I think maybe I'll share a few, but Rebecca, jump in too. And I know there are many others that we can connect offline too and share a longer list if it's helpful. But I mean, one very simple one is having meeting notes and recorders, which I know is with some staff may be a bit late if they're leaving now, but just ways of having, easy ways to capture meeting notes and what's happening in discussions. I know I can share more about PAIRUP if you're interested offline, but we do have ways of really going in and pulling from documentation, from emails, from whatever, different modalities of what you want pulled from Teams conversations and Slack and different to really pull in a story of the data and what's happened. I know Dawn on the line is at SugarWorks, but there are tools like SugarWorks that are good for connecting and pulling information at the end. Go ahead, Rebecca. Yeah, are there tools that you recommend?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, working in a public sector in Germany, I know there is a lot of privacy issues, right? So a lot of the tools that are available that could help with this in M365 are not necessarily allowed, and that makes it a bit harder. But in general, the broader answer is that with the AI capabilities that we have, whether we are on M365 or other platforms that are so well integrated, and that's one of the reasons why I was so excited as a knowledge management expert to jump on the AI train, because now we actually have AI embedded in so many other aspects of the tools we're using every day. We're not just looking at pulling knowledge and information out of documents stored in SharePoint or some other document library. We can actually, the AI can reason over those community conversations, over our chats, over information and collaboration that happens in Teams channels, etc. And that is a way to silently harness and harvest a lot of that expertise and experience. Now, it's not doing it in a structured way, so it's not comparable to a solution like SugarWork, for instance, which is, their speciality lies in leveraging AI to conduct exit interviews and similar application areas, right? So it's not a black or white response to your question, but those are the lines of thinking that me and Emily and many others working in this space are, really makes us so excited about AI becoming democratized and available to everyone, not just the lucky few that happen to be data scientists or computer experts.
I have a following question on that. I don't think the problem is pulling out data or information out of some hidden spaces, but for those people who haven't shared anything or who won't share, to make them convince them to share in the last days before leaving. So how do you have tips for that?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll go
I'll
first.
go
So you
first.
save your voice. I think you
I
need to
think you need
mute,
to mute,
Emily. I get an echo. Thanks. Well, I mean, very often when I talk about AI and how we can use AI to capture tacit as well as explicit knowledge, I always get a question from someone in the room, aren't you concerned about bias in the AI models, right? But I'm actually not, because I'm more worried about the bias when we use humans to interview people who are leaving, etc. Because to your point, you didn't say this outright, but I interpreted that as part of the question. When people are getting ready to leave, either because they've been with the company for 20, 30, or 40 years and they're just looking forward to retirement, they're not going to take time to even try to write down everything they have in their head, right? If we're using people to conduct exit interviews, we're trying to pull that out of their heads. Well, there is going to be bias in the answers that are given by the person who's being interviewed, because they're just not dedicated or committed, because they want to, start the next chapter of their life, or it's a disgruntled employee. But there's also going to be bias in the note taker if that's a human, because they're either deep expertise in the subject area or lack of expertise in the subject area is going to bias what they hear and what they actually note down. And that's where I think AI can really help by extracting some of that knowledge. And also, to your point, it's humanly impossible to write everything down that you've done for the past 20 years. Nobody's going to be able to do that ever, right? But by the fact that we have AI integrated in so many applications, that knowledge is harnessed along the way. So we don't need to wait for the person to leave and that exit interview. We can actually start pulling from that knowledge. And that's one thing to keep in mind with these AI services that are integrated. They have memory. So even if you would delete the source document from your SharePoint or your repository, there has been conversations, there has been meetings, there has been chats as this content or that artifact was developed, and AI is still going to have access to that, even if the document itself is deleted. So there are good things and there are two sides to that coin as well.
Yeah,
and
sorry,
that's why
maybe-
I spend so much time talking about governance, and I don't need
I
to
know
say that to this group.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to that, right? A little bit of my personal thoughts and also my experience, right? I think, and the three of us have been discussing that quite a bit, right? I think it's about embodying the knowledge part into whatever we do, right? So that we don't need to wait for the exit interview, right? Emily, maybe you can shed some light on PairUp right now, right? Or afterwards, right? But and also it's, I mean, in Germany I was saying you shouldn't stop traveling people, right? Related to people who have resigned, right? And I think that is pretty much true in the context of knowledge capture as well, right? As you said, like, how do you get people to actually document upon leaving, right? I mean, there's no way to push them, right? Rebecca, thinking about your session on the communities, right? What's in it for them? Not too much, honestly, right? Unless they wanna, I mean, yeah, they could win a Nobel Nobel Prize for innovation after they left, right? But that's, I think that ain't happening, right? So I think, yeah, it's a pretty difficult situation, I would say, right? And from my perspective, the only thing is about, I think the big levers that I see is more the cultural aspect that we've been discussing earlier today as well, right? And also it's the kind of, the making knowledge an integral part of whatever we do in our lives, right? But Emily, I didn't want to cut you off here.
Yeah, I think the one piece I just add and how we're doing it, I think it's a great question. There are some people when they leave who are bitter or, frustrated or tired, a whole host of things, just ready to move on. So one thing that we will do is we will use AI, as Rebecca mentioned, we'll go in and capture everything we can find and pull from kind of across those documents and create a story of their role and what they worked on, what they did. And then they can go in and, if they wish, it just makes it much easier for them to go in and edit and add in voice recordings or nuances if there is anything that's missing. But it makes it much easier for them to do it. So even if they are and then they can also choose not to do anything, but at least we've then been able to capture a whole snapshot of their work and of what we can find across their projects and presentations and things that they built out. Certainly there's some people who have no paper trail, but that's now pretty minimal, because at least even you have emails and Teams messages and documents that you worked on, et cetera. So that's one way that we're really doing it, is trying to help build kind of a profile of a role, even if someone doesn't add in much, but they can go in and add in more nuance if they wish. I think the other cool kind of psychological thing that's been happening as we do these when staff are leaving is that it honestly honors their work, and they're finding that it shows this really cool snapshot of all the things that they did, which for some companies they can use to then, when they leave, not the proprietary data, but they can have a better portfolio of the kind of projects and work that they did at their company and their expertise areas. So that's been something that's really been a powerful thing to help give to people when they leave an organization as well, but also just to make it a really simple process. But our goal at Perp is really to be doing this all along the way, not at the end, so we can help kind of capture, at any moment, what is this team working on? What is that project? What's the status of that project? What are the learnings that we're having from working with these customers? So that all along the way, we're capturing that knowledge in very bite-sized ways. So it's not so painful at the end, or at the end of a project, to capture everything as well.
I think that really is secret sauce, right? You can't expect to do it at the end. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that Copilot or any other AI is perfect and is able to capture all of the tacit knowledge in every individual across our organizations, but it's a heck of a step forward, and it's a lot better than what we've been able to do at scale for the past 30 years that we've been debating this in the KM community. So that is a perfect segue. How is all of this impacted in an AI-powered world? Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because at the core of it, it's all about human behavior and human drivers and the psychology and how our brains are wired. And AI is not really going to change that. But what is super important is to recognize that AI is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve every problem. I'm sure with this audience, especially, you'll have a laugh and a giggle when I say, if I would have a penny for every time I heard from an IT professional or a CTO or a CIO, well, why do I need to waste time organizing my content and tagging it with metadata? Now we have AI. It's going to automatically solve it all for us, right? We don't need to care about SharePoint or content governance anymore. Well, that's wrong, because AI needs to it's like a baby. It needs clear boundaries, right? So it's no different from a baby or a toddler. It's also, it's very good. It's a statistical model at the end of the day. That's what an LLM is. So it's great at surfacing patterns, seeing trends over time in big data sets and identifying the outliers, but it's not good at interpreting nuance. It does not have emotional intelligence. It cannot tell if you are happy or if you're sad. Now, a lot of the AI services available today can mimic that human behavior. When I have a conversation through the mobile application with my Copilot, it will respond to me in a happy, jolly tone of voice and more jokingly, more casual, if I'm asking it to help me plan my family road trip around Ireland. But if I'm asking it for some medical issues, challenges my mom's been experiencing, and I'm asking some advice, it will take a much more subdued and serious tone when it responds back. And it can actually be offended. Lucas knows first-handedly, I accidentally offended Copilot. We had a bit of a falling out in Dublin this summer, actually. Tagging and summarizing, yes, there is no need anymore to put 20 librarians in a room, no offense, Dawn, but I think you actually appreciate that coming from the librarian side, to manually sift through hundreds and hundreds of thousands of documents and tag them. There are AI tools that can do that because they can extract the sentiment, they can do the semantic analysis and actually suggest how we should tag. And you can also upload taxonomies, etc. But it doesn't have the judgment. At the end of the day, it can give us recommendations, but we should always have the human in the loop, and the human should make the decision. Some argue that you can use AI to curate content. I argue you can leverage the power of AI to suggest artifacts that might be the official version, the curated version, but there has to be an expert, a human, that labels that document. This is authoritative. This is the one source of truth. Indexing and searching, absolutely, it can do that. But again, it doesn't have the human intelligence. It doesn't have emotions and empathy. So it's never going to represent us or replace us in terms of that very important, very human connection that occurs, and that is the most effective conduit for passing tacit knowledge between people. Yeah, I'll start since Microsoft is at the top. Microsoft has been recognized time and again for their incredibly powerful and very successful communities of practice. As I mentioned to those of you who were in the previous session, when I got into knowledge management, it was by pure coincidence. I heard about this thing called communities in the consulting division at Microsoft, and I thought that was a Microsoft unique thing. I had no idea it was actually a thing and that it was part of knowledge management. We had about 100 and 105 communities, 1,000 leads and experts, but we had 43,000 active users and active members on our community platform month over month, year over year. The consulting division in itself was 25,000 people, and we had at least 20,000 more that joined the communities and saw benefit and value from them. And that really was the key thing with the communities that we had, and as it is in any professional services or consulting services organization, no matter where in the world you were working on a project related to a specific technology out of the Microsoft portfolio, you could throw a question out, ask for help, and within minutes, and we measured this, and it was usually, the response time was usually no more than 2 minutes for the first response to come in. So what better way to call a friend than to ask 43,000 of your closest friends and experts? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, and there's so many great examples from different companies also to share. I remember at Disney, we had these kind of regular monthly share-outs where different people came in and just shared the learnings and applications from their projects that they thought might be helpful for other teams. And they also, kind of in vein with the Knowledge Fika, had a cereal bar at the center of the office and also bathrooms that were very central. So you had to pass other people's desks to get in. But the whole design was very intentional so that you were constantly running into people and also had these intentional moments of pause to share and learn from each other. Deloitte, you can see in here, has a similar model of doing these kind of greenhouse labs, which I think are quite cool, where they basically have moments to reflect mid-project and to say, these are some of the challenges I'm having. These are some of the unspoken assumptions that I believe that could actually lead to some really powerful dialogue. At Parup, we're really focused on helping to do this in very lightweight ways all along the process. So our system can sit within Slack and Teams. It can pull from different systems like HubSpot or Salesforce or different tools that companies are using to help pull important insights. We can pull from meeting summaries and offboarding conversations as well, but really helping to capture these learnings along the way and help to make them more accessible and visible for other team members where it's relevant to them. So our system will actually we've moved from more also of just like reactive search, like wait till someone searches for something, to saying like, hey, Rebecca, before you get into this meeting, this information would be helpful for you to know from a team who's doing something similar. or, before you get started in this role, here are learnings from past people in that role of what they learned and what they worked on. So a lot of our system is actually now using AI to proactively both collect information and also push it to the right people at the right time based on their needs and based on the questions that they're having and the projects that they're working on. So happy to talk more.
Nailing that instant access to relevant knowledge in the flow of your work. As loyal as I am to Microsoft and always will be, and as much as I love Copilot, PairUp is years ahead in many aspects, I have to say, hands down. I just love the solution, and I do encourage you to check it out. And I'm not paid to say this, just for the record.
Thank you so much. Well, yeah, I'm happy to talk more. And this shares just a little bit around, most AI chatbots are really trying to pull in from the documented knowledge, which we do, and we'll pull from everything we can find. But a lot of the research suggests, but also just from our own experiences, a lot of the critical knowledge is in people. And so one of our goals is to really help pull in that knowledge more easily and more in a very lightweight way for employees all along their journey. And we also know, a lot of times documentation is quickly stale, outdated. So how do we help find the source of truth and update it in really easy ways? Make sure that the people who hold that knowledge, like subject matter experts, aren't overwhelmed and overloaded, but we're actually helping to collect the information that they have to answer 10 or 20 times a day. How do we make it easier for them to not have to answer it so repeatedly, but give them credit for those answers, and also make sure that it is a give and take for them. And then also make sure that knowledge is not being lost as people shift or leave or transition or projects change. So happy to talk more if you're interested in seeing more about how we're doing that, or even just recommendations for you. I'm happy to talk in any way, but I'll pass it to Rebecca.
And I used to get in trouble with my managers at Microsoft when I was at events, saying that, it's 80% people, it's 10 or 15% culture, and the easy bit is technology. All of my bosses didn't like that. But I think that's very, very true.
Right? Yeah.
It is true. It is true, especially when we're talking about knowledge. So we did prepare a few questions for group discussions. We weren't sure how many people were going to be in the room and how many people were going to be in online, and how many would choose to come to this session. But I think that we should just open the floor up for questions. And, if you want some inspiration, here are some preceded questions, but I would love to just hear from the audience, whether you're online or in the room, and shoot.
Good. I'll turn around and see what happens.
If it's like in Sweden, nothing's going to happen. Nobody's going to say anything.
That's why you that's why you made sure German is in here, right? Any questions, thoughts? How does that sound?
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone's found anything that's working particularly well in your organization for kind of building community and sharing knowledge across, or any challenges. But again, as you wish to what you want to share, but would be curious if you're finding any tools or systems working well or not working.
Just one thought during your talk. We have this easy accessible tools, let's say, which are easy to help, but sometimes it's easy to jump on these tools, and then we have this tool, check off, we're done. So, and forget about the other things. So how do you handle that?
Do you want to go?
It's a very good question, and if you're following me on LinkedIn, or if you look it up, I actually published an article on that, it's probably closer to 15 years ago now. And the title was "To Social or Not to Social," because when Microsoft acquired Yammer, we had a lot of customers who approached us and said, "Oh, we need this social collaboration tool everyone's talking about." And then they started deploying it and implementing it, and it was like social collaboration for the sake of social collaboration, not really looking into what are the business problems it can solve and how does it benefit our organization? How does it help us achieve our goals and objectives, right? So yes, yet another tool, or yet, is a very common problem in a lot of organizations, and especially big ones. My best advice is to always start the conversation before you talk to IT and before you involve IT. I've spent 25 years in IT, but I will say that every time. Keep IT out of the discussion for as long as possible, because what you want is to talk to the business owners and you want to talk to the end users, because business owners will have one perspective of what is happening in their business, but the people who are actually working every day in that business are the ones you need to talk to. So find the use cases, find the little wins, the small improvements you can do, but really think about what are the business problems that we're trying to solve by getting this new tool, or what business problem does this new tool that Microsoft now pushed on us because it's part of our license, right? Because they do that. They shove functions and features and products down your throat because, you know, you're paying a lot of money, so they're going to add more value to it. And it's just about that. What's the business problem at the end of the day that we're trying to address? And can this particular piece of technology actually help us do that? If it can't, well, then don't use it. Don't try to force people to use technology for the sake of using it because it's part of your license.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I mean, I know we all know so much of this is around change management with these tools. You can have beautiful tools, but if we don't understand how to use them, or, you know, it's not a natural part of our workflow, it's really hard. So I think one of the things we often find with companies is, you know, if it is helpful, and I love Rebecca's point, like it has to be tied to actual true problem. Otherwise, it's just more noise. But if it is and is actually helpful, how do you find the champions or the believers who really have influence to say, this is how it's helping me. This is kind of the ways that this could be useful for you. But otherwise, it's just more noise often.
I just got one question to the tools for Yammer or something. Do you have some tips to encourage people to use it? Because I know people from the US like to share, but if you ask a question in Germany, nobody is going to answer. It's just a cultural thing. Do you have any tips or something how we can use this in our organization?
Well, I think as with any change management, it's a matter of, I mean, this is the toughest type of change management you can ever embark on, because it means you need to change the culture. You need people to see the value and the benefit of sharing, and you need to show them that it's a safe environment, it's safe for them to ask a question, and nobody's going to jump on them and say that's a really stupid question, right? So it's a cultural change, and the only way we can change culture is by changing the mindset and the behavior of every single individual in that organization, one at a time. Now, there are ways to do that at scale. It's to share, first of all, communities can be a very effective conduit for that, because if you've established a community which really has that culture of trust, where people feel this is a safe space to ask questions, it's going to be easier. But it's also, as you know, the ground rule of any change management is the 3 W's. What's in it for me as an individual in that organization? What's in it for my organization or my team? And what's in it for our end customer or our external partners, right? The people that you are producing a product or a service to help, that you're selling. So I think that really is foundational to find those value propositions along those 3 pivots. But it's also really important to start small. There are going to be people that are more likely to share in your organization and more open to that type of collaboration, right? So finding them and engaging them as champions, as Emily was saying, is really important, because it's the informal leaders that have the real power in this situation. It's the people that other people listen to because they respect them or feel that they have something valuable to contribute, not because the manager said, you should do this because I said so.
Cool. I think that's a beautiful ending word. I think it's all of a human topic. Sabine, maybe we can connect on that because sorry, Emily. I heard the question before. Yeah, happy to do that. And I think Emily and Rebecca might also be cool people to talk to. My friends, it was lovely to have you. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I'll just close with just saying, we're happy to talk more. I know we'll also, I can share, you all maybe have to go right now, but here are the quick takeaways in case it's helpful of just remembering that change management is key. And so much of this is knowledge and systems are only as good as the people that use them. So thinking about how do you find the right, change management folks or just champions within the organization who can help perpetuate this. A lot of this is within the behavioral design and that really impacts the way that people engage. Remembering that AI can be a partner, obviously not a replacement for knowledge sharing, and also that community and curiosity are so critical for these tools to work and must be intentionally designed. And we are happy to talk more about this with you. I think I'll leave that and I'll just put this here just in case folks have to hop out, but happy to, connect online. Also would love to just talk more and hear what's working for you and think if there are any ways that we can support you or share best practices with you as well. Rebecca, anything you wanted to add here in the final closing minute?
Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're both very active there. And I always try to respond to all the comments I get on my posts, and I try to respond to all the messages I get within a couple of days at least.
Fantastic.
Not always successful, but
yeah, thank you all so much for your time.
Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.